An independent woman.
Hermione Tweedle was both beautiful and rich, and in this year of our Lord, 1895, that resulted in a good many serious suitors.
Hermione, I understand from Peregrine Percival that you have rejected his proposal of marriage for the third time, and this cannot continue, my dear. When I was your age, I had been married to your father for 10 years, and you were already approaching the age of 9.
Indeed, having been born into a family of means, contemporary social values expected her to live at home in the green county of Buckinghamshire, East England, under the strict protection of her virginity, until such time that she could come out, which had been almost a decade before.
I understand, Mother, but sadly I have not been as fortunate as you regarding their eligibility being on the same standing as father. I have found the young men both dull and uninspiring.
Sadly, Hermione was also intellectually talented and keen on independence, attributes considered unnecessary in a woman of the time, and often viewed with suspicion. Overhearing and misunderstanding his daughter's reference to fortune, her father entered the conversation.
Hermione, naturally your marriage would be met with a sizable dowry, as were your 4 sisters, who are well matched into families of equally good fortune. And yet, as the eldest, your mother tells me that you have not only turned down a number of eligible young men of good character and sustainable incomes, but have rejected Peregrine Percival on 3 occasions.
This conversation brought on a state of ennui and turpitude to Hermione, who was beginning to realize with dismay that it was likely to increase, as did her years of maidenhood. Oh, she was fast approaching the age of spinsterhood. With a sigh, she lowered her eyes demurely.
Father, I hear what you are saying, and I have given it much thought. I will amend the situation forthwith.
Both parents beamed in relief. Convinced he had found his daughter's Achilles heel, her father continued.
I understand Peregrine comes with an annual income of pounds a year, which is quite an acceptable sum to consider matrimony. That, together with your dowry, which will be in the nature of pounds a year, will provide a more than adequate income for you to continue to live in a marital state as you have become accustomed. In fact, as an added incentive, I would be prepared to include Peregrine into the family business.
This was indeed an added incentive, to which Hermione did give much thought. By the family business, Sir Reginald was actually referring to the family fortune, which was immense, and had long been forgotten from whence it came. While none of the Tweedle men had ever shown an aptitude for furthering finance, Hermione had, and had spent a good many hours in conversation with the Tweedle manager, Arthur Hawkins, as to where their money was invested and how, with diligence and acuity, this could be improved. Of course, Arthur had felt it necessary to advise his young mistress of the realities of a young female of her station indulging in business activities.
You see, miss, while your ideas are sound, no one in society would find it seemly to undertake business with a woman. It would need your husband to activate them, appear to activate them.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you, Arthur. You have given me much to think about.
So it was a pleasant spring day, a Thursday to be exact, when she approached her latest suitor, Peregrine Percival, at a musical soiree attended by the local upper crust. While observing the niceties of the era by being well seated on either end of the chaise longue, in semi-privacy behind a potted palm, she spoke to him quietly.
Peregrine, I hope to speak to you today to talk about a matter of great interest to us both. My fortune.
Hermione, my dear, that is not true. For one thing, I care not a whit for your wealth. It is your beauty, social graces, and good humor that have attracted me to the idea to take you as my wife. I love you most sincerely.
We both know that to be a falsehood, Peregrine, so I trust you not to speak of it again. Indeed, it is the subject of money I wish to discuss, or rather, your family's lack of it.
Peregrine looked at the young woman with bewilderment, because only that very morning his father had spoken adroitly and delicately on the subject of birds, bees, and family debts, leading to advise Peregrine to make yet another hasty visit to Hermione and a fresh commitment to his ardor.
My dearest dear, my sweetest love, I assure you, it is your delicate, womanly charms that I find most endearing.
I care not a whit for delicacy or charm, but I do care most decidedly for health and happiness, which is aided most decidedly by wealth. I therefore have a proposition to put to you regarding your matrimonial proposals to me of recent months. Indeed, you may well call it a proposal.
The young man was subject to a rush of emotions, and to his eternal chagrin, knew not which one to address first. While his brain had registered the word proposal, he was unsure as to whether he should fall to his knees in the accustomed manner of suitor, or wait for his companion to do so. He began to bluster a series of yes and no's, quite abashed as to which should come first under these extraordinary circumstances.
Yes, no.
Shh, Peregrine, you are taking up too much of my time on this nonsense. I have an appointment with my milliner in an hour, and an hour after that with my dressmaker. While I do wish to talk about myself, it is indeed my inheritance and how it will be administered that is of my immediate interest.
Peregrine's manifestations immediately ceased. Indeed, he was curious about the remark pertaining to his family estate, which he had never questioned before, nor had he ever had reason to consider how it was administered. Like the Tweedles, the Percivals employed a manager who dealt with the tawdry affairs of finance. He decided adroitly to concentrate on the most pertinent and immediate problem, and while bestowing a chaste kiss on Hermione's cheek, said,
Beloved, now that you have agreed to be my wife, I will go forthwith to your father and formally ask for your hand. Then, my love, we need do no more than enjoy our betrothal, while our parents arrange the nuptials in the accepted way.
Although none of this was to Hermione's liking, she knew there was little she could do to defy the social proclivities of the era while in this single state, so nodded her head in agreement. With an acceptance now imminent, and totally unaware of these ministrations, both parents and prospective in-laws of the young couple were delighted with the new turn of events. Of course, if consulted, Hermione's mother would need admit she had been planning for such an event since Hermione had been born. It was simply time and place, and of course, the bridegroom that had been the missing details.
My dear daughter, I have consulted with the bishop and the almanac, and it appears that a 12-week engagement is still both fashionable and seemly. So I have instructed your father to post the banns in the best newspapers forthwith. I, in turn, will administrate all other matters of importance.
She was, of course, referring to the far more important issues, such as the wedding gown, the availability of acceptable dressmakers, and the choice of suitable unwed bridesmaids. Of more immediate concern was the guest list for the coming engagement party. It was imperative to consult the social register to ensure that everyone was of acceptable social standing. A month later, and yet again, the Tweedles would be hailed as the foremost family within the district. The last born, the eldest daughter, was now firmly pledged. Her betrothed her of a suitable stock, and the engagement party hailed a great success. The timing was propitious, leaving just enough time for the ladies to seek their dressmakers yet again in preparation for the coming wedding. A few days before the ceremony, Hermione's father summoned Peregrine to his study.
Peregrine, while I am delighted to welcome you into our family, it befalls me to discuss the delicacy of Hermione's dowry, which will be in the order of...
He mentioned an annual sum of money that would be lodged in an accredited banking institution in Hermione's name, and so the contract was solemnized. The very next day, Hermione sought Peregrine's company, and conscious of her fiancé's inadequacies in furthering the family business of the Percivals, let alone the Tweedle, as promised by her father, thought it best to let Peregrine know of her expectations.
Peregrine, while the idea of leaving my family home as a maiden delights me, the idea of observing the delicacies of marriage does not. So I have instructed a solicitor to draw up an agreement to which we will both adhere. Now, please sign here, here, and here.
Although, once again, a little taken aback by his fiancé's forthright manner in the way of married life, Peregrine was relieved that he was now betrothed to an heiress, and that others were taking care of all necessary arrangements. Keen to get back to the gaming tables, he nodded agreement, signed the papers, and fled. And so it came to pass that on the 20th day of June, a Saturday no less, the unblushing bride walked down the aisle of St. Martin's of Beckwoodshire, and 30 minutes later strode back as Mrs. Hermione Tweedle Percival. The reception would later be acclaimed as a triumph of the season, and, as is the usual custom after weddings, the newly marrieds retired to their honeymoon suite soon after the merriment began. However, when approaching the honeymoon bower, Peregrine found the door firmly closed, with him and his new bride on opposite sides.
Hermione, my dear, I urge you to unlock the door.
Peregrine, my dear, you will find the bedroom across the hall both comfortable and ready for your use.
Hermione, my love, as your husband, it is customary for us to share the bridal bed, at least for our honeymoon night.
Peregrine, my love, sadly I have a headache, and intend to have a headache every night from now on. So I suggest you find another bed and another person with whom to share it.
Hermione, my sweet bride, I demand you open this door so that we may begin our married life in the customary manner.
Peregrine, husband, dear, while I am pleased to have left my family home, the idea of wifedom and motherhood does not appeal. I have no intention of becoming a brood hen with a child every year until you have an heir and a spare. So I suggest you take your ardor to the nearest flop house and begin some long-term arrangements.
Although only too aware that within the year his parents would be wondering when the heir, let alone the spare, would materialize. At this moment in time, Peregrine reluctantly but immediately did as his bride bid. In the meantime, Hermione was delighted that her husband so easily acquiesced to her unconventional life expectations and retired for the night alone with a copy of Oscar Wilde's latest comedy, An Ideal Husband. In these years of an aging queen and heavy traditions, women were not allowed to own property, not could vote, did not have legal rights, and were generally controlled by their husbands. History dictates that all these administrations would eventually be overcome with the advent of the suffragette movement for the female vote in 1918, and the advent of the contraceptive pill of 1960. But in this year of 1895, they were not even a twinkle in Hermione's progressive eye. Sadly, although the century was rapidly coming to an end, along with old established traditions, the heavy mantle of social acceptability among the noblesse oblige was still stifling, and Hermione found many irritations in the running of her affairs. However, thanks to Arthur Hawkins' acuteness, enhanced by a vast exchange of money, she did learn of a situation in which she would be in command of her finances, while not losing her preferred societal position, and almost immediately began to put this plan into process. It was a wintry winter day when she surprised Jenkins the houseman, Mabel Hutchins the cook, and Irene the scullery maid by venturing down the back stairs to the relatively unknown depths of the kitchen.
Good morning to you, Mrs. Hutchins. I am keen to follow the modern trend of my contemporaries and become a little more personally acquainted with the kitchen. So, while I assure you I will not interfere in any of your preparatory, culinary, domestic duties, I will visit from time to time in order to observe and possibly duplicate your skills in certain preferential dishes.
While Mrs. Hutchins had little option than to acquiesce, inwardly she said, on this interference to her inner sanction, and outwardly, well, did you ever, Jenkins, over a quiet glass of port that very evening? Well, I never did. Come into my kitchen she did, bold as brass, if you please. And so the year rolled on to the eve of Hermione and Peregrine's first wedding anniversary. It was a pleasant summer day, a Tuesday to be exact, when they were having lunch, and Hermione made a rather unexpected remark.
Tell me, husband, is the chicken pie to your liking?
The chicken pie? Well, to be truthful, my dear, I did not give it much thought. But now that you ask, I find it most acceptable.
I am delighted to hear this, my love.
And indeed she was, for the chicken had been her virtuoso performance with the oven, which had coincided with Mrs. Hutchins' day off. On such days, it was normal for Mrs. Hutchins to provide a charcuterie board of cold cuts, to which Hermione had accompanied her first culinary attempt. However, buoyed with confidence, the young bride took this opportunity to take her cookery skills to the next level and spent many conscientious hours in later days perfecting a mushroom pie. to which she knew Peregrine was particularly partial. Which is where we leave the young couple, for sadly, their story is almost at an end. It came about that first anniversary was also their last, as their marriage would not survive another year. Indeed, Peregrine would succumb to a most unexpected abdominal infection due to food poisoning. From whence it came, no one could cater. Although, in spite of her admonishments, Mrs. Hutchins was forced to immediately leave her employment under a veil of suspicion. Happily, she was given a fine reference, together with a substantial sum of money in lieu of lost wages. Oh, incidentally, the good lady immediately married Mr. Jenkins and accompanied him to another county where they both raised chickens. This left Hermione a young widow, not necessarily a merry one, but a healthy, wealthy one, who, with an independent mind and independent means, was soon able to take up her social position as a dowager. A term relatively unknown in this 21st millennium, but may be defined in the Cambridge Dictionary as a widow with title or property derived from her late husband's estate.
You have been listening to An Independent Woman, written and produced by Brianda Cross, who also played Hermione and Hermione's mother. The narrator was Kathleen Monteleone, and Jake Hollingsworth played all male parts, Peregrine, Hermione's father, and Arthur Hutchins. If you enjoyed this audio drama, please give us a review to encourage our scriptwriters and actors to provide more plays of similar and sometimes different genres, which you will find listed at fastfictionpodcasts.com. Thank you.